Hey YouTube, I'm going to do a coilover conversion and install some caster camber plates in my 74 Capri Mk1. The reason I'm doing this is I have replaced everything in the front end of the vehicle, all the way from the steering rack all the way out. Everything is new, and the car still has a very minor steering shimmy. I can feel it or hear it more than feel it, but I know it's there. It's definitely there. So what I've done is I've purchased ground control coilover kits and caster camber plates, and we're going to install those. Now I'm doing this video because the instructions that came with the parts are, well, to be frank, they were absent. I had to beg for them, and when I got them they were still inadequate. So there's some things here that you need to know if you're going to install these, but at the end of the day, the kit works. The steering shimmy is absolutely gone. I was able to add in more caster, and that completely eliminated the steering shimmy. So without further ado, we'll get on with it. These are the original top mounts for the front McPherson struts, and there's no adjustment in them whatsoever. And my car has a very minor steering shake in at highway speed, and I've tried everything, and everything is new from the steering rack all the way out. So the hope is that putting in these ground control caster camber plates will allow me to add some caster, and that should take care of the steering shake. At least that's the theory. So we're going to find out. So first thing we got to do, obviously remove the wheel. But as you can see here, I've taken out the roll bar, and I got to take the brakes off, undo the lower control arm, and then the brake lines, take the brake calipers off, and then remove the strut. And I'll pick it up when I've got all of that done, and we'll go from there. I'm doing this because the instructions from ground control are non-existent. So if anybody else is interested in adding caster camber plates for a Mk1 Capri, this is one option that you can look at. But like I say, the instructions, well, I guess for lack of a better word, suck. So anyway, I'll come back in a minute or two. Just a note about the brakes. When I took the line off the caliper and the flex line off of the strut, one of the things I did is put this piece of hose over the threads and then crimped it off, and that prevents you from losing all of the fluid out of your master cylinder. And if that happens, then you're basically in for another whole project, bench bleeding the master cylinder and all of that. So that is just something to be aware of. And also the caliper itself, as you can see, the line is the high point in the way it's sitting. So that prevents any additional fluid from coming out, so you end up with minimum air in the system. Even though you've had it open, you're still going to have to bleed the brakes, but it's a whole lot easier if you do it this way. So it's inevitable that you're going to lose some fluid, but if you keep it to a minimum, you won't lose the prime in the lines, and you'll have minimum air to get out of the front calipers. So okay, anyway, we'll be back shortly. Okay, we have the strut out, the original strut, and as you can see, it comes out with the spring, and the spring is held captive. And I can tell you from having done the first one, you do not want to undo this top bolt, or nut rather, capturing this spring, because even when the spring is fully captured as far as you can, when you undo that top nut, it's still going to spring out a little bit. And if you don't do that, I'll show you here just how much tension this thing is under. As soon as there's the free length of the spring. So there's a huge amount of pressure on this spring when it's captive by that nut at the top. So again, you want to compress this as much as you possibly can, and this is the tool to use. When these are installed, it is impossible for that spring to, if you will, get away on you. So I will install those and compress the spring, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, as you can see, I've compressed the spring, and I'm just going to take it off here. And compare it to the uncompressed spring. You can see the difference in length. And if I tried to take that off without compressing it, there'd have been a catastrophic explosion here. So it's really important that you compress that spring. So okay, we'll continue on here. So the next step is to grind this lower base off, and I'll come back in a minute and show you how that gets done. Okay, so I've got the spring off. As you can see, the compressor makes a heck of a difference in terms of the overall length, and without that spring compressor, there would have been just a catastrophic explosion as that spring released when the nut ran out of threads. So it's really important that you do that. The next step is this piece right here. You have to use a pipe wrench on it because there's really no way to get a wrench onto it. So a pipe wrench on it and release that, and then you can take the cartridge out. Once the cartridge is out, we have to cut this lower spring perch off. So that's done with a 3-inch cutoff wheel, and I'll show you what we're going to do there. So we'll come back. Okay, so I've cut off the lower spring perch, as you can see. So now what I have to do is cut this off here. So I'll show you how that gets done, and we'll go from there. So what I did is cut a groove down the length of it, and then I start going around just above the weld and cutting through the top layer but not the bottom layer, and you just keep working your way around. So we'll get that done and come back. So we have it, the ring cut off, and I just got to clean it up, and then we're ready to weld on the D-ring and start reassembling it. So as you can see, I've got the D-ring on, and the flat side faces the axle, lines up with the axle, so it supposedly is to eliminate tire rub, but the spring is wider than that. But anyway, and I've welded it in 3 or 4 spots around it just to hold the D-ring in place, stop it from rotating. It's not really necessary to have real super strong welds because the D-ring can't get past the ring where the old original lower spring perch was. So yeah, so we'll continue on. So this is the basic configuration for the strut. So you got the D-ring that I welded on, and then the adjuster, and then the spring, and the next step is to install the caster camber plate on the fender apron. Sorry about that. Anyway, we'll get over there and do that in a sec here. So this is the caster camber plate from ground control. As you can see, there's adjustment for the caster, and the camber is adjusted with these 4 screws right here. So what's not obvious is on the underside here you've got the cap that goes inside the spring, and there's a bearing on the bottom side of this plate, the camber plate. What's not obvious is that this plate, which you would logically think would go on the top, actually goes on the bottom exactly the same as the OEM plate. And what it does effectively is it supports and reinforces the hole in the fender apron. So when it's installed, it looks like that. And the tie wraps are basically capturing the spring, so that if the lower control arm extends too far beyond the normal travel, the spring doesn't flop around. So and this piece here, the sleeve, as you can see, it comes all tie wrapped together, zip tied together, and that is actually the way they want it installed. But what is not obvious is that this top plate here, like I say, has to go underneath. So we'll do that, and we'll come back. So this is what you should end up with when they're properly installed. The 3 mount bolts on the outer, 1, 2, and 3. The spec says 38 foot-pounds torque using a small torque wrench, but with an Allen key underneath there, I wasn't able to get them to 38 pounds, so I just tightened them up as tight as I humanly could, and with the nylock nuts on them, they're not going to come loose. So if you need to adjust your caster, you loosen these 3 off, and this whole plate slides fore and aft, which will give you your caster adjustment. So, and your camber, of course, is these 4 here, which if you loosen those 4 off, you can slide this in and out as needed. So that's that part. So we'll go and bring the strut over and install that. Okay, so we have the coil overs fully installed, taken it for an initial test drive. There is no zero, as in zero steering shake. So it would appear that being able to add in the additional degree or so of caster is all it needed. And of course, as delivered from the factory, you can't do that, so putting in the caster camber plates and doing the coilover conversion has taken care of the problem. So there you go. So, and this is my 5-liter sitting in its home. Anyway, there you go. Hope it helps.